clearly the temperature was set in the room this morning to make me feel right at home. There's snow on the mountain over Hobart at the moment, so thank you for that not so warm welcome, but thank you also for a warm welcome and for the invitation to be with you at this conference with you today. I'm a bit sorry that I couldn't stick around tonight as well. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun in a beautiful location. Apart from that long introduction, thank you very much for that, but I prefer to introduce myself like this, and that is, I'm David and I'm from Tasmania. But I'm not the David you know from Tasmania. That would be Australia's second greatest Test batsman of all time, David Boone, of course. You know the bloke in the middle, and this is me on one of the 1,000 days and nights or thereabout. I like that sort of epic biblical proportions. 1,000 days and nights or thereabouts that I was Premier of Tasmania. Now this was the best day. All of the other 999 were much worse than this. This was the day that Ricky Ponting, Australia's greatest Test batsman ever, of course, scored a double century at Belrive Oval. I hosted the Prime Minister, of course, and we beat India on the fourth day or thereabouts. Every other day after this was quite challenging, and I've decided to throw that slide out. I've been using that slide to introduce myself around Australia since I left politics 4 years ago. I decided to throw that slide out because my son, who's 11 years old, Hudson, has decided that he wants to catch the bus to town by himself, so he can go to JB Hi-Fi and EV Games and all the other Xbox sort of shops. So I said to him, before he catches the bus to town by himself, he has to explore the city using Google Street View and know where the bus stop is and know how to get home and all of those sorts of things. So the other night, a week or so ago, he's spending a couple of hours exploring the streets of Hobart and Google Street View. Now, if anyone knows Hobart, this is Davey Street, one of the main drags of Hobart. This building is the state government main offices, and on about the 15th floor is the Premier's Suite, so it used to be my office up the top there. And about 8:30 one night, Hudson's looking through Google Street View and he yells, "Dad, Dad, Dad, you've got to come and see this. You know you've made it when you've made it to Google Street View." And what he discovered is this bloke walking along the street here has the camera went last, and you probably can't read it from out the back there, but that sign says "Vote Bartlett last." So I thought this was the best. My son thought this was the best thing ever, so he took a screen grab, emailed it to me, and I think I should use it because it's kind of got that digital angle to it, which is the thing, of course, I want to talk to you about today. Quick pop quiz first question, though. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the fact that I think everything's connected now, and therefore everything is changing. And it's those regions and those organisations, those cities and those towns and those nations indeed that best understand these changes that are going to make the most of the opportunities that come with it and mitigate most of the threats that come with it as well. But a quick pop quiz question that hopefully starts to prove my point. What does Anne Hathaway, screen actor, Academy Award winner, Hollywood screen siren, have in common with, or have in relation to, the Wall Street Composite Index, or the New York Stock Exchange Composite Index? Any guesses? Well, I'll give you a hint. Every time Anne Hathaway wins an Academy Award, or gets a rave review for her latest movie, or gets announced in a new movie to come out, and there's an explosion of sort of goodwill across media and so on for Anne Hathaway, the Wall Street Composite Index goes up 2 to 3 points. This is not financial advice, see your own brokers. You're on the finance people, you'll understand this better than me. So what's the relationship? Well, the relationship is this, that 75% or more of all of the transactions that happen on stock exchanges across the world today, and that's some 7 to 8 billion transactions, individual transactions that will occur on stock exchanges across the world. Of those 7 or 8 billion, 75% plus are actually not executed by humans, but executed by high-functioning, high-speed, big data algorithms that are trawling the internet for sentiment and working out what they should buy and sell, these high-speed, big data algorithms. Turns out, of course, that the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, greatest stock trader in history supposedly, of course his publicly listed vehicle that he owns the majority shareholding in is called Berkshire Hathaway. And these algorithms can't quite distinguish between good sentiment for Hathaway, so they think Hathaway's on the move, that means the Oracle of Omaha's on the move, that means we should buy, that means the stock exchange goes up. Everything is connected, but not always in a completely accurate way. 75% of all the Fortune 500 companies will be names we've never heard of in 2020, is what the managing director of Boston Consulting Group recently said. Just some context for what I want to talk about today, I suppose. Context because I believe as a nation and as regions and as cities and so on within that nation, we have an obligation to understand the changes that are going on in the world that are impacting on us now. So a little bit of context about that. I think this is, so I've picked 3 slides to describe what I think is, gives us the best really quick snapshot of context, of the Australian context at the moment. So the 5-year iron ore price gives you a bit of a picture of what's going on in terms of our economy. This is percentage of global GDP as per different continents or countries, sorry. The red line is of course China. The green line is Europe. The blue line is the US. This is now crossed over. And that gives you some pretty clear indication of where growth's coming from. But in this context too, if you think about, I recently met with a guy called Gus O'Donnell, who was head of Prime Minister and Cabinet for Blair, Cameron and Brown in between. And he said, well, I don't know what the Australians are worried about. In the UK, we have debt of 90% of GDP, and our nearest trading nation partner is Europe, of course, which is Europe's growing at maybe 1.5% if we're lucky over the next 5 years. Of course, Australia has a debt of less than 12% of gross domestic product, and our nearest trading nation, China and the rest of Asia, Southeast Asia, of course, are growing at more like 7 and 8%. So he doesn't get the emergency that we think we're in here in Australia. But I guess the other context is the rise of connectivity in our nearest neighbours versus the rise of connectivity in Australia. And we see extraordinary growth through Asia of both fixed line and mobile device connectivity that is going to drive another wave of growth beyond the current sort of building and construction wave of growth that's driving China at the moment. So today really what I want to focus on is the concept of ubiquitous connectivity. If I asked this room 5 years ago, if I come to this room 5 years ago and said, who has a smartphone in their pocket or a tablet device in front of them or in their man bag or what have you, about 20% of you would have put your hand up. The sort of early adopters, the nerds like me. Got an email from Apple this morning telling me my watch is shipped and next presentation I'll be doing from my Apple Watch. So the early adopter nerds like us would have had them found it pretty interesting. But now, of course, if I ask who's got a smartphone in their pocket and or a tablet device, every single one of you, I'm certain, would put their hands up. That is ubiquitous connectivity. But it's better to think about it in some other graphical ways, I think, the way the world's changed in that 5 years. There are more people on the planet today that will put a smartphone in their back pocket than put a toothbrush in their mouth. It's kind of disgusting, but it's true. I'm sure all of you were out until 3 a.m. I put a toothbrush in your mouth this morning. But this is the best picture of how the world's changed in the last 5 to 8 years. Does anyone know where these two photos were taken? They were taken in exactly the same spot. Well done. So this is the election of Pope Francis. No, Benedict, sorry. This is the election of Pope Francis. I love this guy down the bottom right-hand corner, you know, the good crane on the Motorola football photo. That photo would be worth, you know, $1 million on eBay now, I'm sure. This, though, is the best picture within the space of one popedom, a short popedom, reign of one pope, how the world massively changed. And this, I believe, is why everything is changing about the way we do business, about the way organisations operate, and the way our economy in which we're operating is behaving. Or as Clay Shirky would say, you know, technology to nerds like me, really interesting when we're early adopters and we've got it, but it only gets really, really interesting, in fact, when it gets really boring or ubiquitous. And ubiquity, and you'll see this graph repeated through my slides, or the shape of this graph repeated through my slides a number of times today. Ubiquitous change often looks a bit like this. That is, gradually things happen, and then suddenly, whack, it's off the dial and everything's changed. And if we don't work out where that point of inflection is and how we need to plan for the future, we're going to miss a lot of opportunities and come up against a lot of threats. So I think new business models are being driven by ubiquitous connectivity, and particularly consumer connectivity. The truth is, and all of us who work in government here, the truth is it's the first time in the history of the planet that consumers, citizens, voters, constituents, whatever you want to refer to them as, ratepayers, are ahead of us when it comes to technology. They've got more power in their pocket now than we're able to deliver on. And I think that's a generalisation, of course, but it's generally true. And this ubiquitous connectivity is driving three massive and radical transformations across the planet that are having an impact on our nation and on our communities right now. And I think those transformations can be grouped in three ways. One is extraordinary new ways of creating wealth or creating value, but of course some of the old ways we used to create wealth, particularly in regional Australia, have been disrupted and destroyed. Disruptive new ways of having a conversation with our customers. Insert whatever words you want for customer: patient, student, constituent, ratepayer, voter, whatever, client, however you want to see them. And thirdly, unexpected new ways of solving old and wicked public policy problems that we haven't quite got our heads around yet. And they're the three things I want to talk about today, and tell some stories that hopefully leave you with a sense that these assertions are true. I often get asked, do you miss politics? And I say the only thing I miss about politics is a really good stand-up argument. So if people disagree with my assertions, I'm very happy for them to stand up and say so, and we'll have the argument here and now, or out after over a cup of tea later on. That'll be terrific too. This is a t-shirt I own. My wife won't let me wear it out of the house because she's too embarrassed by it. It's one of the nerdiest t-shirts that I bought from a nerdy t-shirt online store, in inverted commas, called Threadless.com. I bought it in 2006. I own 26 t-shirts now from Threadless.com. So what you might say, just another online retailer, disrupting the high street businesses in all of your towns and cities, no doubt. But Threadless isn't that, in fact. What it actually is a very smart marketplace in which people who want to design t-shirts can post their t-shirt designs, and people who want to buy t-shirts, nerdy ones, usually like this, can get together. So all Threadless does is every month runs a ballot where I was one of the first 3,000 subscribers to Threadless. There are now over 30 million subscribers to Threadless. And essentially they ask for t-shirt designs, you submit your t-shirt designs, they run a ballot and these subscribers all get to vote, and the top 100 or whatever t-shirts get produced. So they're really not a producer or a designer of t-shirts, they're a marketplace for getting people together who create t-shirts and those like me who want to buy t-shirts. Now, this is an instructive story, and this is from 2006, nearly 10 years ago. This is a gratuitous shot of my 9-year-old daughter Matilda doing one of those aeroplane rides on Daddy, while Daddy holds her in one hand and takes the photo with the other, underneath the Eiffel Tower in September last year. Took my kids for their first trip ever to the Northern Hemisphere, to meet family, to do all sorts of fun things. Now, of course, 10 years ago when I went, well, 12 years ago, because I know it was before we had kids, such a great trip. My wife and I, the last time we went to Europe as tourists, as opposed to as business, on business or what have you, as tourists, what did we do? We went and bought the Frommer's Guide, or the Lonely Planet Guide, big fat tablet of stone. We cut out the pages of Estonia and other countries we weren't going to save weight in the backpack. And we used this tablet of stone to direct us where to go, where to eat, what to buy, what to see when we got there, how to get there, etc. from one tablet of stone voice telling us what to do. Now, of course, what do we do this time in Europe? We use TripAdvisor. Now, what's TripAdvisor? It's a very efficient online marketplace to get people together who have knowledge and information about travel, and where to eat, where to sleep, when to, etc., drink, and people like me who want that knowledge about travel. Of course, when we got there, apart from public transport and trains and so on, to get between places, we used Uber. Now, what's Uber? It's made a big splash in a recent New South Wales election in terms of public policy, because it's quite disruptive. It's simply an online marketplace, not unlike Threadless or TripAdvisor, that allows us to share rides with other people. Now, I guess my first assertion is that ubiquitous connectivity is changing everything and changing business models. My second assertion for you today to consider is that governments, in my view, local, state, federal, and other instrumentalities and institutions, need to behave a lot less like Lonely Planet, tablets of stone handed through one channel on one, with one expert opinion about information, and behave much more like TripAdvisor. That is, create a marketplace in which citizens, government, institutions can share and solve problems together. And I'll explore what I mean by that. But this is a trend, not just a trend that's happening in travel, it's happening across the board. Of course, Airbnb is the same thing. It's an online fishing marketplace to get people together with who have rooms to share, and those like me who want to rent rooms. Everyone's heard of Kickstarter, probably heard the recent story, I think the New South Wales people who invented the new beehive that allows you to turn the taps on. So rather than smoke the bees to get the honey out, you can just turn taps on and get it out. They needed to raise about $800,000 to get this business off the ground, great invention. They put it up on Kickstarter. What's Kickstarter? An efficient marketplace for getting people together who have money to invest in startup techs and those who want that money. They raised $10.8 million in 3 weeks to launch their business from strangers across the world. Freelancer, I met Matt Barry, who's a Sydney-sider, CEO of Freelancer in a Washington DC bar in 2010, and he pitched this idea to me. I'm going to create this online marketplace that people who do voiceovers or do jingle writing or do web pages or do logo design or whatever can get together with people around the world to sell their services effectively in this very efficient online marketplace. I went back to the hotel room and I said to my wife, I met this strange guy down in the bar. This idea's never going to go anywhere. What a silly idea that is. Of course, it's now worth $750 million on the Australian Stock Exchange, this company, so what would I know? The flight car, similarly, allows me to drive to Boston Airport, leave my car, and borrow someone else's car in the LA airport, bypassing the hire car business altogether. And of course, Australia now has its own version of that called Carhood. Now you might think, oh, that's all very well and good for, warm and friendly and cuddly markets like t-shirts and travel, but actually this whole business model is extending into much more highly regulated financial markets. So Lending Club has now lent $4.5 billion US in small business loans, $30,000 US or under in the US, which is really, I've got $30,000, I can put it up and say I want an 8% return, and it will match me up with someone to get me that return, completely bypassing the banks. Now, if you think this isn't, Guevara is a similar model, except for insurance, coming out of the UK. And if you think this isn't coming to Australia, Society One, if you haven't seen this yet, my attention was drawn to it because Mike Smith, the CEO of the ANZ, recently was bagging it out and saying what a terrible thing it was. And I thought, oh, well, this must be something that's going to disrupt the banks. It's upsetting Mike Smith, it must be something that I should have a look at. Of course, this Society One is like Lending Club, an Australian version. Guess what? Who's the main investors behind it? Murdoch and Packer families. So you can bet your bottom dollar that this is a big disruption coming for banks in Australia. And what is it? It's the Threadless for small business loans, basically. Now, what's going on here is, I think, a complete disruption to the way we think about business models. And what I want to do is try and explain that, and then move on to what can we learn from this as government? We're not specifically in the business of making a profit, and I think government's a lot more complex than making a profit, frankly. But I think there's a lot we can learn from this shift in business models that apply to government. Since the Industrial Revolution, frankly, or probably the Agrarian Revolution, business models have been one thing. We make products, we sell them to customers, we do some form of innovation, which might be market research, new colour, new size, new shape, new, whatever, new pizza topping, and then we make new products and we sell them to customers again. And this has basically been the business model that's sustained business for a couple of hundred years. But I think everything's changing because everything's connected. And these business models, the best business models, are changing in this way, or the ones that are most successful. They're changing products to services. That is, for example, I don't buy razors anymore. I subscribe to a company called Dollar Shave. They take $6.95 a month out of my credit card, and every month, on the first of the month, new razors arrive in my letterbox. I've got more razors than I know what to do with because I feel like with these things I should bring along and hand them out. Anyway, so I've subscribed to a service, and they've got me locked into the service. But the very best business models then are taking that service and creating a marketplace. And it's the marketplace that is creating and driving innovation, newness, knowledge, solutions, new products, new services, and so on. Not the company, if you like, innovators themselves. Let me put this in oops, I don't have the slide I thought I had next, but so I'll talk about it anyway. It was supposed to be a picture of pizza, because I think the best example of this in Australia, in what you would assume is completely undisruptible business model, that is pizza. What can possibly be disrupted about pizza? Get home Friday night, Dad's too tired to cook, so he rings pizza. Hello, we'd like a half Hawaiian, half Aussie, or what have you. In fact, probably half-half's about the only innovation that's happened in pizza in the last 30 or 40 years. 40 minutes later, ding dong, pizza arrives, kids are happy, Dad can relax. This is an undisruptible business model, one would think. However, Domino's Pizza, and Don Major, I think the CEO of Domino's in Australia should be held up as a great corporate giant, because I think he's one of the few CEOs in Australia that really get digital disruption and what's happening to the business models. So first of all, what Don Major did is he created an app, and that app turned pizza product into a service. So when I log on to that app, it knows who I am, and it knows what pizza I like, and when I usually order, and what the kids like, and all of those sorts of things. It also created an ability for my 11-year-old son Hudson, again, to create his own pizzas by dragging and dropping ingredients onto a pizza, and he can buy it. Makes the most disgusting pizzas you can possibly imagine. And he does that on purpose so no one else in the family will eat it, and he gets the whole thing. And then, when you hit buy, of course, this beautiful big clock comes up and it says pizza going into, pizza being made, pizza going into oven, pizza coming out of oven, pizza going in the car, pizza arriving at your door, ding dong. I used to rig this up so that I could stream this to the Apple TV, to the big Samsung 65-inch. So that on Friday night I don't have to go, Dad, when do the pizzas come? And they can just watch it on the screen. Now, this is a great service, and it made us buy more Domino's pizzas than we ever bought before in our lives. Interestingly, it made Australia do that too, because in the first week of the release of this app, Don Major did 27% of his annual revenue through the app, and his share price went up 25 points, 25% of points. Again, not financial advice, so it's not great. But interestingly, he didn't rest there, because what he had done, of course, was take product and create a service. What he's now done in the next wave of innovation is create a marketplace. So what he's allowed the kids of Australia to do, like Hudson Bartlett, is create a Hudson Bartlett disgustingly over-chillied pizza, but not only buy it for himself, put it up in the Domino's store. And if anyone else buys that pizza, so you can look up the Hudson Bartlett special if you want, and you buy that pizza that my son designed, he gets $1 in his account. Now, there are kids who have made more than $20,000 out of designing pizzas on the Domino's app or on the Domino's store and selling them online. They've got their own hashtags, their own Facebook pages promoting their pizzas, of course. But what's Don Major done? He's created a marketplace where the market is getting together very efficiently to create the new products and services that he gets to sell. Sack all those people who are going to design the Aussie version 2 or the Hawaiian version 2, and don't need them anymore, because the solution is actually coming from the crowd, the ubiquitously connected crowd, who are all connected to these devices. And I think these sorts of things are driving new business models and a new need for business strategy. So let me go on, and I'm going to deal with the second two transformations we're going on a bit more rapidly. But the second great transformation, disruptive new way of having a conversation with our customers. Both high-tech and low-tech I'm talking. This is Obermünchen, population 78, a Swiss village in the Swiss Alps, who want to do up their tourism a bit, get more people visiting their town. They had free B&Bs and low occupancy rates, so, you know. So they ran this thing where they said, if you like, put up a Facebook page, visit Obermünchen, you know, free. See, if you like our Facebook page, we will print out your photo from your Facebook page and stick it to our town wall as a sign of thanks for liking our Facebook page. Well, 45,000 likes later, they ran out of room on their town wall. But even worse than that, or better you could say, that some 28% of all of the 45,000 people who liked their Facebook page then visited Obermünchen to see their face on the wall. The three B&Bs were a little overwhelmed by this thing, you know. But it's an interesting thought, isn't it? That all of a sudden, for zero cost, we can reach out and have a whole new conversation with a range of customers that didn't really even exist before in a disruptive new way. Whoops, what have I done there? Turn the screen off, that was good. Of course, we've got to remember this, particularly in government, we have to be cognizant of this, I think. That just as we can have a disruptive conversation with our customers now, for the first time in history, our customers can talk back, really talk back. And we're seeing that in government a lot. I experienced that in government very much when I had 10,000 friends on Facebook, all telling me with the caps lock key on what they thought of me. This is a disruptive new way of having a conversation. But think of the kid who got bumped off a Tiger Airways flight recently, and of course they wouldn't refund his fare for some reason, so he got in the Virgin queue and tweeted something about Tiger Air. By the time he landed from Sydney to Melbourne, it's 69,000 retweets and shares of his complaint about Tiger Air. They refunded his fare. And we've talked about low-tech, but in the high-tech space, there are not only new disruptive ways of having that conversation, but there's new technology that we can have that conversation through. Augmented reality is one of these that I think has real potential in local government and in both in interpretation of the city or the town or your heritage or whatever, but also in the management of civic services and poles and wires and pipes and roads and all of those sorts of things. I use augmented reality every town I go into in Australia to decide where I'm going to eat at night. A little app called Layar, I think it's $2.99 in the App Store, and I can look through kilometres of streets into restaurants, see their menus, see their TripAdvisor reviews, even potentially make a booking, and then use my phone to guide me there if I choose to go there. Now that's augmented reality happening in every city of Australia right now, and most of our small businesses don't know what's going on. Of course, the channels through which we're having this disruptive conversation are massively changing as well. It's a slide from my friend who's CIO of News Limited in Australia. 6 times increase in mobile usage looking at News Limited websites over this period of time. Similarly, this is US data, a couple of years old, but Australia follows on behind. This is data that shows time spent, where we're spending our eyeball time, and where advertisers are spending their money to try to communicate with us. Massive overspend still in print. So if you think the disruption to newspapers is over, you don't see nothing yet. But look at this. This is actually where we're all spending our time. This is slides from KPMC in the US, and they're about to release a new set. My prediction is that this bar will be up here, that this bar will be more like here. There's still a massive discrepancy in how we're trying to communicate with our customers. They are trying to communicate with us via this device, And I'll bet many of us in local government and state government and so on still have web pages configured for full screen activity, I have no doubt. Many of you will have made that leap as well. So, some more data to back that story up. But just as we think we're getting our heads around all this social media in local government and this disruptive new way of having conversations with our constituents, that disruption is again being disrupted. Here's a bunch of apps that most of us probably haven't even heard of, but Viber, for example, is doing 100 million messages a day, and a lot of us wouldn't have used it. There is a massive trend from what we used to think of, and some of us are just getting our head around social media like Facebook, from the broadcast of fewer messages to large audiences, to frequent interactions with smaller clients. People are getting sick of this model is what I'm saying, and are moving very much to this model, and that trend is happening right now. Similarly, companies are starting to use big data to understand, to have that conversation with their customers. So I love this quote. It's a quote from Suzanne Collins' first book of the Hunger Games trilogy, Catching Fire. I highlighted it on my Kindle, as did 27,500 and something other Australians highlight this passage on their Kindle. How do I know that? I know that because Amazon knows that, because they're collecting data about how you're reading books now. In fact, they know that 75% of people who finished the first book of the Hunger Games trilogy, their next online transaction within 7 hours of completing the first book was to buy the second book. Now, if we don't think that's going to impact the way they personalise services, sell books, write books, create books, etc., then we've got another thing coming. Thirdly, and this is where we bring it down to understanding what this means for local government. Unexpected new solutions are emerging for old public policy questions that we need to get our heads around. Now, many cities around the world we've seen deploy many sensors. You know, take this example and deploy sensors in all of your car spots, able to aggregate the data up so that you can deliver to your citizens via an app where the parking spots are as they drive into the city. But more to the point, aggregate that data up, collect it over a period of time. You've got a perfect longitudinal study to understand where new parking infrastructure needs to be built in your city. These are the sorts of ubiquitous connectivity solutions that are emerging. Similarly, people connect not only dumb, cheap sensors, if you like, they're deployed on mass scale, but people as sensors are becoming part of that marketplace to solve problems. Let me explain what I mean by that. So when I was on one of the 1,000 days as Premier, swine flu swept out of Mexico City, made the news. My public health officials came to me, head of public health, and said, Premier, you have spent $1 million deploying clinics across Tasmania to wait for people with swine flu to come in. 32 clinics. And I said to the public health officials, can you tell me how this disease is going to spread, how it's going to come into our state and where it will go first, and how can we predict it? Can't do it. Well, it turned out they were wrong. Some University of Otago research shows us now that if you aggregate up all of the searches on swine flu on Google and geolocation searches, that is, I've got a cough, I've heard of this swine flu thing, I hear it's bad, I type swine flu into Google, hit search. If you aggregate up, geolocate all of those searches and aggregate it up, it's a perfect, in advance, 24-hour in advance, predictor of how swine flu spread into Australia down to street and suburb level. So all of a sudden we've got some new ways of solving old public policy problems. Similarly, here in New South Wales, in fact, there's a freeway sign with those in Tasmania. These are the signs that you New South Wales commuters know, say, 8 minutes to next exit, 18 minutes to the following exit, 36 minutes to whatever. Guess what? They were wrong. You probably knew that already. Something that your Roads and Transport Authority worked out a couple of years ago was they were only actually accurate about 60% of the time. The algorithm, the computer algorithm that was driving those signs was incorrect. Now, what would normally happen in government, we all know this in government and particularly in finance, and if you've got someone responsible for IT, you certainly know it. We need a new system. oh right, we'll write a functional spec, we'll go to tender, or no, first we'll go to EOI, then we'll go to tender, then we'll beg Treasury or the head of finance for some money so we can fund this thing. Then we'll pick IBM, because no one gets sacked for selecting IBM or what have you, except for Queensland after the health debacle. We move on, and a year and a half later, we're 50% over budget, 50% over time, aren't we, on every IT project we do, just about? And we finally deliver this thing, and we might have made an increase of from 60% to 70% accuracy in our road signs. Well, instead of that, the New South Wales Roads and Transport Authority, with the imprimatur of the minister at the time, and I say this in the yes minister sense of the word, a courageous decision, took all of the freeway data available for New South Wales Roads and Transport, put it up on a website called kaggle.com, a piece of Sydney technology as well, and basically proved to the world we've been getting it wrong all this time. Can you help us get it right? They offered $10,000 of prize money and a 3-month timeline. The $10,000 was 2 Peruvian PhD maths students living like kings in Lima or wherever now. 3,500 entries. They got an algorithm within 3 months that now is 95% accurate to drive those signs on New South Wales freeways effectively. So this is an interesting new way of thinking of solving an old public policy problem. But I think even more interesting, in Boston, they decided that they had a problem with cyclists were complaining about their cycleways, 3,500 kilometres of cycleways across the city of Greater Boston. So instead, any local government know this, what would we do? We'd send the maintenance crews out to track, we'd find where the potholes are, and we'd schedule it into the workflow, and we'd build a program to fix the potholes in the cycleways. Instead, what the City of Boston did was write a $5,000 app for Google, for Android and Apple, promoted it to their cycling community, said, you want better cycleways, download this app, switch it on when you go for a ride, and put the phone in the back of the Lycra or what have you, and this app, bumps, will measure the bumps you go over, because these things have got incremental on them. We'll aggregate up all the data, and the City of Boston has an up-to-the-second perfect picture of every single pothole in every single cycleway across the whole city for $5,000. But not only do they have that, they have a longitudinal study of how those, if they collect that data over time and analyse it, a longitudinal study of how those potholes are either improving, which they can report back to the cycling community, or degrading and therefore need attention. However, we haven't seen anything yet, I think, because I've been talking a lot about connected devices, people. The greatest disruption to come, the Internet of Things, if you like. These are all the things that, can I ask who's wearing a health and fitness wearable device like a Fitbit or a Jawbone or what have you at the moment? Right, put your hands up high, come on, be proud, early adopter nerds. Right, normally I am, but my Apple Watch is arriving tomorrow, so I've thrown the Fitbit away. Now you, guess what? If I come back in 2 years' time and ask that question, every single one of you will put your hand up because Apple and Google and Android and whatever, and Windows, and Microsoft are embedding that technology in all of their devices, wearables, it'll be on your button shirt, it'll be in your glasses, everything. So that's that gradually and then suddenly thing. 2 years' time, I'll bet you, I'll ask that question again, everyone puts their hand up. Maybe you don't know it. But it's that connectivity of actively and passively creating huge data sets that is findable and shareable, that is going to change everything about the way we solve old public policy problems. Already, for example, in Tasmania, Sense-T is deploying thousands of sensors across paddocks in Tasmania, which enable then any farmer to go on board and interrogate all of those sensors, but build data analytics over the top, when to reap, when to sow, when to harvest, when to fertilise, etc. And sensors are starting to measure more and more complex things. We know, for example, in the Galaxy phone in 2010, there were only 3 sensors, an accelerometer, a proximity and a compass. This new 2014 phone has 10 sensors in it, all of them creating sets of data that are in theory findable, shareable and interrogatable to find new solutions. And of course many of you will be starting to think about drones and the sort of data and so on you can collect through them as well. So in the short time I have remaining, what have we learned today? Firstly, This is a graph you will see time and time again. This is a graph just that adds up all of those consumer electronic devices, basically sensors in consumer electronic devices, and how it's grown. Looks familiar? This is a graph that shows the growth in cloud services, therefore ubiquitous computing via ubiquitous connectivity is how I describe that over this period of time. Looks familiar? This is a graph that shows when we were back in mainframe territory, the whole global market for mainframes was 1 million units, 10 million for mini computers, 100 million for PCs, 1 billion for desktop internet, 10 billion. Essentially, this next circle up here that I'm trying to describe to you today is totally ubiquitous in that it's in the tens of billions of connected devices creating shareable and findable information. Bill Gates said at the outset of the internet, or when Microsoft got on board, content is king. That is content, your website, front page, will bring people to you. But the truth is he only got it half right. Community, that is what Don Mage is doing, to bring community together around that content to create new content and new solutions and new innovation is really what is key. Platforms like PlaySpeak out of Canada are allowing councils, for example, in Canada and in Australia, to geolocate citizens' responses to online surveys, to consultations, and therefore add value and weight to the data that comes from those platforms. Every business now, in my view, in government, is a software business. That is, if you haven't got the software, and I don't mean that means you all need to go out and employ a bunch of software engineers or finance that. But I do believe that you need to look at your global spend or overall budget, strategic budget, and emphasis that you put on using software to engage with community, to engage with solutions, to engage with these new marketplaces. In fact, to stop behaving like Lonely Planet. By the way, Lonely Planet was bought for £600 million by BBC in 2002. And BBC sold it 4 years later for £30 million. That was the loss in value that Lonely Planet experienced due to the TripAdvisor effect, or the TripAdvisor disruption. And that if government don't start to understand that we've got to behave less like Lonely Planet and more like TripAdvisor, it's a similar, maybe not in value, but a very complex set of disruptions that will go on for government as well. And software, understanding software that drives your business, that drives both internal but external, particularly citizen-centric services, is the key to understanding how you're going to do that. The crowd, ubiquitously connected crowd, you can go and look up a TEDx talk of mine that I did, that I titled, Why a Ubiquitously Connected, Digitally Empowered Community is Smarter Than 1,000 Policy Wants. After I posted this thing, or did the speech, I got a 3-page email from the head of Premier Academy in Tasmania telling me why I was wrong. But I think you missed the point. The point being that if we empower people and we drop that veil around data and we share more and we make the impermeable walls of government more permeable and more shareable and more like TripAdvisor and less like Lonely Planet, we are going to engage the power of the digitally connected crowd. If we keep those walls up, what we're going to get is that tiger air effect, effectively. So I think we need to think in new ways. We used to think about outsourcing, and we used to think about IT as a cost centre in government, particularly in finance, where we're thinking IT, cost centre, they cost us money, we'll take 8% off them this year because that'll help us balance our budget next year or whatever. I think we need to think a bit differently about this stuff. So instead of maybe what we used to think outsource or insource, we need to think upsource. That is, when we need solutions to problems like Don Mage did, new pizzas, we upsource to the community and provide a platform solutions to be made. But when we think of, but we also need to downsource to shared infrastructure. So if I'm a pizza entrepreneur, I don't need to create my own shop now. I'll use the Domino's pizza infrastructure to do that, but I can create wealth and solutions and opportunities for myself by downsourcing to their infrastructure. So very lastly then, second to last, I think we're headed on this journey. Everything we used to electrify, we're now digitising. And everything we're digitising now, in a very short period of time, we will, when I use the word, I don't know whether I made this word up or not, cognitise. That is infrastructure, particularly city infrastructure or infrastructure that local government manages, becomes ubiquitous, invisible, smart utility. Unfortunately, it's not. This font wasn't that smart. That's wrong on the screen. Smart utility. And if you accept what I'm saying about that hundreds of billions of connected sensing devices and active and passive sharing of knowledge and data, that's the direction we are headed. But we all know IT is like an iceberg. This is the bit we all want, the graph, the dashboard that tells us where our current balance sheet is, or where, give the CEO the dashboard of exactly how city services are run. That's the bit above the water, we all know that. But we also know that in councils, we've got this massive thing below the water that is made up of governance and culture, it's made up of existing infrastructure, it's made up of legacy core systems, it's partly made up of the Excel or Access database in the corner that's probably carrying some core data, core business that you run your business on, but it's sitting there because it's always sat there. It's made up of deployment, it's made up of desktops, it's made up of bring your own devices, it's all of this stuff under the water. That is the challenge we need to meet to get to this stuff that we want to deliver on. I won't go through this slide, but I have that slides available. I guess these are the areas in which I think we need, as councils, particularly as local governments, to consider when we're thinking about what this new world and what's changed about this new world means for us. So I won't go into that detail, but I'm happy to leave it as part of the slides that are distributed or made available to students. So that's me. You can find me in all the usual places. Thank you very much.